I'm Ellen. I'm president of the Irondequoit Historical Society, and I welcome all of you to this great presentation that we're going to have this evening. I see, many new faces, and I see some of the people who have been coming to some of the programs in the past, and I welcome you all. Thank you for coming. I just have a couple of announcements before we have our speakers. And one of them is we will be looking for a new board member for next year, September of 2023 through 2024, a secretary position. So if anybody's interested in that, please let me know. You can talk to me after the program. Also, there will be some sign-up sheets in the back for people who are new tonight and would like to leave their name and email address so that we can send you information on our next programs. And also we have some new books to sell. One is The Images of Irondequoit. That's back there at the book table. So if you're interested in buying any of our periodicals, they're back there. The only other thing is, if anyone hasn't noticed, we have a new door on the Pioneer House. It looks just beautiful. The person who did it was a craftsman, and he custom made the door to go with the period of the Pioneer House, and it really came out beautifully. And also, you could also check out our library display that we kind of rotate some of the items. And this is Winter in Irondequoit display. So please check out all of those things, and I'm really thrilled that all of you were able to make it tonight for this program. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce Dan Reardon, who is going to introduce our speakers. So here he is, Dan.
Thank you, Ellen. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right. And welcome. My name's Dan Reardon, and it's my distinct pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce our three guests tonight. And I have a question for you. Is there anyone out there that likes to have a beer occasionally? Just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. Okay, well, we have, okay, good. The beer master also likes beer, as does the owner. So this is great. And today we have, or this evening, we have with us three Irondequoit residents who will address the explosion of microbreweries and the creation of the Irondequoit Beer Company. So I'd like first to introduce Mr. Mike Nolan, and Mike and his wife, Wendy. Wendy, you're way in the back. Just give us a wave. There we go. They are the co-owners of I-Square and the Irondequoit Beer Company. And next, I'd like you to meet Leslie DiCesare, who was at one time I-Square's first employee back in 2011, and is now the general manager of the Irondequoit Beer Company. Leslie. And finally, we have Kester. Nate is a high school English teacher in the Rochester City School District and is the head brewer at the Irondequoit Beer Company. Hey. And this evening, our program focuses on how the land where the Vercruysse family once farmed would become the site of the Irondequoit Beer Company. And the barn was actually saved. In fact, there it is right there, was saved and became the centerpiece of the brewery. In fact, if you go inside, walk your way into the back, you'll actually have a chance to visit Betsy's stall. Betsy was a horse that was in this barn, and Leslie says sometimes mystically there might be some hay on the floor and we don't know where that came from. And that's not all. Nate will share his perspective on the microbrewery phenomenon. So please, let's sit back and let's learn the history of the hidden treasure on Titus Avenue, which is now the Irondequoit Beer Company. Thank you for coming.
Well, good evening. Thank you for all coming tonight. Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Reardon. Dan may not have told you, but he was my photography teacher in high school. Not to age him any, but but thank you for the introduction. The Vercruysse property, 775 Titus Avenue, has been part of my life going back as far as I can remember, all in different means and different ways. And to end up owning that property is truly a dream come true. Add on top of that, the beers that Nate makes and the joy on the faces of people coming through the door every day. It's entirely fulfilling for me. It's the most exciting thing I've ever been involved in. And the process of developing the land, the building, the brewery, was just something that I will never, ever forget. I really cherish all the memories that came along with that. But my history with the Vercruysse property started back in the early 1970s. My mom would take my younger sister. We were number 5 and 6 of a family of 6 kids, so we always had to go because they had trust the older ones with us at home. So, and mom's routine would be to go to the plaza, Irondequoit Plaza back in the day, Faye's Drugs and Sibley's and all the different businesses that were in there, the shoe store where the tavern is, the hardware store across the way, Clem's Dairy, the House of Guitars, and Vercruysse Farm Stand was always one of our stops that we would make where she'd get fresh vegetables. We all had a lot of corn, so it was pretty much a weekly stop, probably going back for me 1972, 1973, 1974, during those times when we had to go on every shopping trip with her. And I remember going in there, don't remember what we bought, what we did, but it was just one of those stops that we always made in mom's routine. And when I was 14 years old, maybe 10 years later, began working for our family business, machining company. Worked there every day after school, and loved it. Loved that whole thing of adulting, as I called it. Worked there for a number of years, 2 years in fact, and had this brilliant idea that I would rather just work full-time rather than go to high school. And I made the brilliant decision to leave high school, to drop out. And so I was going to go work full-time at our family business. It didn't exactly work out great. My dad heard that I had not been going to school and attending, he fired me. So point one, kind of trouble. But anyway, I was fortunate. I bullheaded. I was not going to have made a bad decision. I had to prove him wrong, that this was the right decision for me and the right direction for me. And went down and I got a job where a friend of mine worked at Lakeshore Automotive. Somehow they became under the impression that I was 18 years old, and although I was 16 at the time, but they gave me a job doing oil changes, changing tires, and making an occasional AAA call to jumpstart somebody's car or to change a flat tire. And it was great. I was living that thing where I could adult, and I went home and told my dad about my new job and I was going to get money and that I was going to be self-sufficient. And he then informed me that I needed to pay rent to stay at home. Rent to the tune of $50 a week. And I might have been cheap, but I didn't see that as a very good value. I had to share a room with 4 sisters, so getting in a bathroom was next to impossible. Decided that, well, may as well take the next step. I'm going to move out. Didn't really call it running away because I told everybody I was moving out. And I found that to be a little bit harder than expected when I was 16. And so I found a friend who would become my roommate, Tim. And we looked around, and in the front of the Vercruysse property was a for rent sign. And it was for rent. And it was right there. Used to be a house directly in front of the brewery, a 2-story house, 767 Titus Avenue. And I went in, marched in, told him who I was and why I was there, and I was going to rent this apartment. And he too became under the impression that I was 18 years old, not 16. And he agreed to, Bob Vercruysse agreed to rent me that apartment for Tim and I to move into, and moved in just a few days later. It was already furnished, so this was a perfect circumstance. And further, he kind of sweetened the deal because it was springtime, and he said, if you are interested, you can work at the fruit stand and you can earn your half of the rent. Tim will pay his half and you can work off your half on weekends. So I worked Saturdays and Sundays at that fruit stand, and doing relatively simple tasks, carrying flats of berries up from out back and apples from the cooler and corn and melons, and basically picking things up, putting them down, restocking the shelves, and work closely with Ellen Vercruysse, Mrs. Vercruysse, and loved it. It was great. Occasionally I would sneak in back and steal one of Mr. Vercruysse's cigarettes and take it out and go into the barn and sit by myself, because nobody ever went in the barn at that time. It was 1984, and just my little solace spot. I went back there, smoked a cigarette, sat on some old milk crate on the floor, dusty, cobwebs, broken equipment all over, leftover supplies and whatnot strewn throughout the place. But I would sit there and relish in my new adulting life. I was working, I had my own apartment, I was doing my own thing. And it became this place that I would just go to and sit there for a few minutes, kind of to escape work, but also to, just think for a few minutes, get out of the fray of the moment. And it was like the best summer of my life. I hadn't had a lot of experience, big family, you're kind of a number when you're one of 6. And just having this thing where I was in control of my own destiny, and just truly enjoyed that time. Fast forward exactly 30 years, 2014, we were in the mix of I-Square. I-Square had started as a vision, or we announced our vision in 2011. By 2014, we had built the first building, getting ready to open some of the restaurants in it. We were still in the midst of a lot of demolitions, a lot of relocating of existing tenants, had a lot going on. And we had one particular tenant that the person who sold me the house said, you need to take care of this lady, single mom, 2 kids, and made me commit to make sure that everything would be good with her and that we wouldn't just kick her out. And unable to find a suitable rental house for her, house came up for sale on Lorraine Drive, number 60 Lorraine Drive. And a couple of days later, we purchased the house, relocated Dottie over to that house. And while we were preparing and cleaning the house up and getting it ready to move our tenant into, it was backed up to Vercruysse's, the back side of Vercruysse's property, back where the greenhouses were. And could look over the fence and look at it, and it was very sad. Most of the greenhouses were completely full, 6-foot-tall weeds. The whole area was just strewn with broken down equipment. Most of the glass in the greenhouses had been broken out of them. Some of the roofs had collapsed in. It just looked like a deserted barn from a long time ago. And that was the first time I had seen it in 30 years. And it really kind of struck a chord with me looking at it. And I'm one of those people that needs to clean up and organize and keep things straight and orderly. And this was anything but that. And a few times I snuck back there and wandered around, and there was nothing going back there. It was me and the deer and the rabbits and the turkeys and just normal Irondequoit wildlife. But it compelled me. I stopped over to see Bob one day. Didn't expect him to remember me. He didn't, nor Mrs. Vercruysse, but got a chance to talk to them both and just reconnect, tell them that when I had worked there, that it was a great experience for me and that I had enjoyed my time, and just talked for a few minutes. And Bob and I went outside. At this point, Bob Vercruysse had quit smoking. He had quit drinking. He was very sound of mind. We had a great conversation. For anybody who knows me well knows that you'll rarely get me to sit down for an hour-long conversation. It's just not in me, but it was. He had a lot to say, but what really caught me off guard was the fact that he knew exactly the entire story of I Square. He knew exactly the issues we were going through with the town and the government. He knew properties that we had purchased. He knew the ones that we were working at. He just knew the whole story probably better than anybody I had spoken with before. A lot of people read the headlines and knew the gist of it. He had a lot of internal detail, and it just amazed me. So we end up talking then and a number of times over the next year or so. Pop over there on my way to go to Titus Mower to get a piece of equipment repaired or whatnot. And one day, early 2015, we were talking, and we were back by his house or where he parked, and I could see the back of the barn, and the back of the barn had a large 10-foot diameter hole through it. Almost looked like a meteor had landed on the barn, and just this giant gaping hole. And I remembered the building, didn't really remember all the details of it or what it looked like inside, but I asked him about it, and his son was there, Matt, their youngest son. And I said, "Can you let me in?" And I went over his padlock closed. He dug out the key, let me in to look around. And it was like going down memory lane. I mean, you got that same feel when I walked through that door, that feeling that it was a place that was just comfortable to be, that had a rich history, that had something about it that just made you feel good. And it was deep in dust, cobwebs, water damage, broken glass, trouble, supplies that had probably been there since I worked there in 1984, and all over the place. And I ended up spending a few minutes in there and kind of looked around, and it weighed on me over the next week or so. Just the thought of what it was and that hole in the roof, it was bothering me. So I went back to Bob a couple of weeks later and said, "Would you mind, I know you're not in a position to afford it, but would you mind if I repair the roof on the barn?" We didn't own the property at the time. We didn't have intention to buy the property at the time. But it was something that just to save this cool old building. And he thought I was a little crazy, told me so. He spoke his mind clearly. But he said, yes, absolutely. And he told me a little about the history of the building, and we chatted. And so we hired a contractor, and he came through, and like most construction jobs, end up being quite a little bit bigger a job than what I had estimated, just patching this roof up. And we put in, and you'll see them in some of the slides we'll go through in a few minutes. Replaced the roof rafters, the whole roof decking, all new roof, new soffits, new eaves, just covered the whole thing. And you can see it in this picture. That was already done in this picture. And that had been the only thing that was done, is just to make it watertight again so that the building would survive. And because another winter with that, it probably would have gotten to a point it was too deteriorated. And so we did it, spent a couple of months working on it. While all this other stuff was going on at I Square, that was the place I'd sneak over to and check on Dave, who was doing the work for us, and see what was happening, talk to Bob a little more. He really was he was a gruff guy, but he really had a very genuine heart and opinionated. Fortunately, a lot of our opinions aligned, so it made things a little easier for us, but just enjoyed it. Sadly, mid next summer, that coming summer, I guess, Mrs. Vercruysse passed away somewhat quickly, unexpectedly. Helen was Bob and the family. She was the glue of the family. She was everything to all of them. And you could feel it in talking to them. You could just everything was a bit lost. Didn't even know how to pay bills. It was that she did everything. And so anyway, we talked some more and continued, and he would always remind me that he was supposed to be the one to go first. This was never in the scope of their thoughts that she could pass away without him. And we continued to talk and chat periodically, and it was just a fond memory of their family, of that building, of that site. Later, I guess it'd be early in 2016, their eldest son, Tim, reached out to me, said, farm's gonna go into foreclosure. We don't have the money, Dad doesn't have anything. We're kind of in a bind. We need to sell the property. Are you interested? And I said, of course. Yes, we talked about it for a couple of weeks. Talked to Bob about it. He said, I'm gonna die on this property. He was set on it, no matter what. So he didn't want it sold. But we agreed to made an agreement that he could stay there as long as he wanted. Don't care, just enjoy, stay your home. He was a little sick, but he was expected to live a bit longer. So we purchased the property, did that, and about 4 months later, he passed away. It was hard on their family. It was also somewhat of a relief because he was not the same without his wife. He wanted to be with her. And although he was only 73 when he passed, it was, he had just an incredible impact on me. And amongst all the chaos and all the things and everything that was going wrong, I could come over there and something made me feel better and feel whole inside. So when we got to, we owned it for a couple of years before I met Nate. Nate was a customer of the Reserve Bar. Frequent, came in, had a craft beer or two, and would talk about beers. Loved it. And one of his visits, he brought with him a couple of beers he had brewed in his garage. 5-gallon bucket, basic system on a stove, really about as basic as you can get it. And that wasn't the first time somebody brought me a home brewed beer. And usually I was slightly reluctant to taste those beers because rarely were they very good. But the beer he brought me, it was a dark beer, which is right up my alley. It was a almond milk stout. And today goes by the name of Three Shores Almond Milk Stout, still on our menu routinely. It was one of the best beers I've ever drank. Popped it open, it said AMS on the top, almond milk stout. And I'm not sure, I think we opened one while you were there and you gave me a second one to take with me. And before I had finished that second beer, I was going to be building the brewery with Nate. And it was just a match. We had we had this building, didn't know what we were going to do with it. It was too small for a brewery, but it had that character, that vibe, that feel. That just was so fitting of an emerging industry like craft beer, and that welcoming feel that beer gives you. The rest is kind of history. We built the brewery. We did a lot. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides, if I may. This is one, and the front yard there in front of that was reminiscent of the entire property. Everywhere you went, there was piles of old pallets, old machinery, equipment, stuff we didn't even know what it did. Picture from way back in the day. It was the building was built as a one-horse stable. I'm sure the people who constructed that building never imagined us having 90-some people in there enjoying food and drink. But it was home to a one horse that worked the farm, and actual horses lived in there from the time the barn was built in 1916 through mid-1950s when the Vercruysses bought their first tractor and no longer needed a horse to work the farm. That picture of the Vercruysse family was passed down. Bob was the third generation owner of the farm there, once being much larger, and graduated down to when we bought the farm from them. There was just 3 acres remaining. They had sold off bits and pieces along the way, both the family and others, to develop so that they could keep the money flowing, essentially. That's Bob there, a little younger than what I remember him as. Great picture, flyer they had, 3 generations of growers. Some of the people, young ladies down on the right, are people that I would have worked with in the 1980s, and was a lot of fun. Another image, kind of what it looked like prior to us taking over. The original green doors, those are sliding doors on the front. So was the actual front door to the right there in the image, was a sliding door. They were changed out as part of our reconstruction, but view from the back just shortly after we put the new roof on. And that was, they lived back here, just down this hill that would be back toward us, was where Matt had a house, and Bob and Ellen had a home there, amongst 5 greenhouses, large walk-in cooler, and a number of other amenities. The land was perfect for farming. Irondequoit typically is a great sand base, had a natural water stream running through the back of the property that came over from the pond that once resided where Irondequoit Plaza is. Was a pond before my time. They called it Koi Pond, and that stream runs from that pond down underneath Hudson Avenue, comes out into that field behind Aldi's, runs straight directly through the back of the property at the brewery, and goes down and feeds the little pond along Titus Avenue that you see at the bottom of the hill. So they were able to utilize, so they had a lot of water pumps, everything. It was all watered naturally, which was really cool. One of our cool discoveries along the process of cleaning out the barn, on one of the clay tile, the exterior is clay brick. This is the inside of that, one of the walls, where one of the masons had obviously hand scribed in a picture of 1916. So it's the first time we knew when it was built, because there was not a lot of good record keeping back in those days, and probably not bets and all that. So we refer to that guy as Hop Hat. He's we don't know why, but that's what it came to be, and so it is. This is what greenhouses looked like after we cleaned them out. Prior to that, floor to ceiling, end to end, equipment, leftover supplies, just like I said, all kinds of stuff. But this was one of the ones that was in slightly better shape, and this one would have been located directly behind the brewery. Another more equipment, a lot of places where that just moved ahead on me a little bit. Go back. Yeah, so the flats of berries, they had lots of shelf, they made everything. There was, it was a farmer's way. You bought very few things. They made everything they need. They did their own repairs on everything, repaired their own everything. This was the view that I had. The property that I bought, 60 Lorraine Drive, would be right on the other side of that fence there. So when I looked over, this is kind of what I saw. all the way back in the stream, that tall tree line in the back left there, that's where the stream runs through the property. The more I walked the property, the more we cleaned it up, just it sparkled, it came to life. It was green and lush, and it was just really cool. Dug out an old trailer. We found this so deep into the brush, it took hours to drag it out of there, but it still rolled. It still worked. I still have it. I haven't figured out what to do with it yet. That's my tractor. We pulled it out with. And that's Betsy's stall as it looked when we took over. Again, the building had been already cleaned out before we realized we should probably be taking pictures of all this stuff along the way. But the stairs to the ups to go to the second floor still remain in the same place. They're new stairs, of course. These were water damaged, but Betsy's stall, that trough area on the left side, all was going to stay in place. And we worked and worked. Everything we wiped off just gleamed. You dust it off and it was like, oh, that's really cool. And you clean a little more and you'll see one of the gentlemen that worked on it that did all of the ceilings in there. Everything in that front area today, ceiling, walls, stable, are all original. We were able to maintain all of that, including that door to the stable still slides today. It's amazing after sitting all those years. A little bit of leftover stuff. I think we do have the deer horns up on the deer antlers up on the wall still. There's common sight around the property, but this area would be the dining area. So just as you come back, that window to the left is what we opened up to make the entrance into the main building. And that's the front doors that I love so much. We had them craftsmen rebuild them not as doors, but as a wall that looked like the original doors, because it was kind of that feature from Titus Avenue view. Old apple processing machine. And this was the upstairs. This is kind of what it looked like when we dusted it off. You can see the work on the left where we replaced the entire roof and the joists and the thing a couple of years prior to this. Where the hole was, and but the remainder of it, including that sliding door off the second floor with no stairs, still is in place, but we locked it closed just in case anybody has too much to drink and decides to shortcut. That is Tim Vercruysse, the oldest son there, and he was instrumental in both giving us history, keeping up with it, but also making me feel good about the process. Tim and his brother Matt both work at Titus Mower. They're both great young gentlemen. They supported me in taking their farm and transforming it into something else. I didn't know how that part would go. Obviously, they're realistic to know that it would never be a farm again. It would never be what they grew up with. But for them to be supportive of us and our development, and they're also fans of beer, which is kind of cool. And the brewery, as we put the addition on, the addition was well thought out. We used our same architect as we used for all the other buildings, but asked him to kind of shake off his architecture hat and put on this farmer model of let's make this gel together, and how do we make the front 100-year-old 102-year-old building at that time feel like they belong together. And he really did a great job with it. The design and a lot of the work that Leslie had done to coordinate the two buildings together, it was really something cool to be a part of. This is where we had opened up the back. Looks a lot different now, but that's the back area where you come in, the tasting room we refer to it as, and the doorway leading up to the tasting room. And another view of the tasting room, a lot more broomed up now. We had a floor, we had the garage door positions, and everybody who worked on this with me. I was quite involved, more involved than most of the construction projects we do. We didn't use a general contractor. We wanted the ability to do this our way, exactly, not cut any corners and do everything, and be able to adjust our plans as we went. And so myself and our carpenter, Sean, did a lot of the work, especially on the front side where it was more of a rehabilitation of the old building. I know, look quite a bit different there. That one skipped over me quick because there's my picture in there. Kitchen, bathrooms, bar area, brewing area to the back. And why did you put that picture of me in there? Our brewing equipment arriving, that was fun.
That was a great day.
That was a great day. The gentleman in the top image here, he worked, you can see the little area where the paint's taken off of the wall behind him. That was like 2 hours of work. This gentleman was a boxer, so his arms were just mighty and strong, and he spent months in there stripping down all the wood, cleaning it, sanding it, meticulous as can be. It was just a terrific time. And the gentleman in the bottom right is the one who redid the front doors, and quite a craftsman. Leslie, did I pass into your part? I feel like, okay. The light, John Greco has a great metalworking business at the public market, thank you. And it's great. It was very fitting to have him involved in it. He created our chandelier. Leslie designed it, and he made it exactly as the two of them got together. And just one of them things, how you can make this new old balance and really make it work. And that is one of the coolest light fixtures I've ever seen.
Excuse me, Mike, were those leftover pieces of things you found around the property to make that?
No, that was not. That was metal John supplied, right?
He got it from old high schools that have been demoed, and he took them from there.
Yes. Yeah, he's very much into the same kind of feel we were. So like I said, he's perfect for this because that's was his nature, that reuse.
Like old pieces of equipment you could have found around.
Right. We do have some of them in the brewery. Well, you'll probably see them in some of our later pictures, but the team we used, and there wasn't a lot of us that worked there. It took us a long time to build the brewery because we had a very small, very selective group of people that we entrusted with the construction of it. But Sean, he's my right hand every day, works for us full time still. In the top left, electrician, carpenters, Diane Zachrin, some of you may know her, she oversaw the construction activities. Our carpenter team and our painters. And with that, I'm going to turn you over to Leslie DiCesare. Just before I do, Dan's introduction was awesome, but Leslie was our first employee of I-Square. She's created the vibe, the feel, the look of nearly everything that we have there. I was so ecstatic when she agreed to take the position of general manager there because it allowed me to take a breath. I just knew what she would do with it and had so much confidence that all my expectations wouldn't just be met, but far exceeded. That certainly came true from the day before we opened, maybe 8 or 10 months before we opened, all the way through today. The brewery has a feel to it when you walk through that door, and I'm not sure if it's only just me, but I just walk through, I feel at home, I feel comfortable, satisfied, excited, just everything you want to get from a facility, and for people to enjoy laughing, the conversations you hear from when I'm behind the bar and all that, and people are just enjoying themselves, and she's created such an amazing atmosphere. I'm very, very lucky to have her on our team, and Leslie DiCesare.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, I'm the general manager of the brewery. I just want to ask a quick question. How many people have actually visited IBC? Just raise your hand. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I hope you had a wonderful experience while you were there. If you didn't, we'll talk later. I want to hear why, and I will fix it. Anybody have driven by and said, oh, I should pull in there, and I never do? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, I hope you finally decide to turn into the parking lot and enjoy what we have. Anybody here not like beer? I'm not a beer drinker, so I probably would not. Well, I would welcome you to still come and visit. Obviously, we brew beer. We have 10 beers on tap at all time that rotate, but we also have wine. We have hard cider. We have a couple cocktails. We have something that's called kombucha, which I don't know if anybody's ever had that. We have soda. So we have a little bit, for everybody, hopefully. But I would also encourage you to try what we call a flight. It's 4 5-ounce pours. And it gives you an opportunity to try the 10 beers that we have on tap. When I started there, I wasn't much of a beer drinker, I will admit. And I'm like, what am I going to do running a brewery? I don't really like beer. But I said, okay, why not? And I like beer now. Thank you, Nate.
My pleasure.
And it just, we have light beers, we have dark beers, we have lagers, we have fruited beers, we have IPAs, we have stouts, which I probably will never like, but we have all kinds of beer.
We all have character flaws.
Yes. But I would encourage you, even if you don't like beer, to still maybe give us a try. And see what you think. We also have a great food menu too. So as Mike said, we opened in October of 2019, and we're jamming, we're trucking along, and then comes COVID. Yes. And we're like, holy cow, what are we gonna do? But we did. We figured it out. We said, okay, we can't let people come in, so what are we gonna do? We'll do takeout. So we started doing takeout, and we got our crowler machine. I don't know if any of you know what a crowler is. It's a 32-ounce can. So if you want any of our beers to go, you can pick out the beer you want, and we put it in a crowler, and we seal it right there. And we got that machine, I think it was probably like 3 weeks prior to COVID. So that really worked out for us. So we did that, and we started doing food to go. Nate and Bobby, our two brewers, were actually delivery men. If you wanted to have food or beer delivered, they would deliver it to you. We did bingo. We did online virtual bingo with Mr. Jim Thomas. I don't know if any of you know him, but he's probably the funniest man I know. And we did bingo online. We had at one point 1,000 people playing. We had people from Canada that were playing in Canada. We had a lot of fun with that. We would have a couple of musicians come and play in between the games, and it was fun. But essentially, we learned how to roll, and we learned how to face the challenges, and it actually made us better, stronger. Not that I'm glad we went through it. I think I lost a couple of years of my life going through it, but we did it. And a lot of it is because of the team that we have there. We have about 40 employees that I call my family. They're just great, great people. Servers, bartenders, dishwashers, cooks, brewers, just a great group of people. As I mentioned, we have 10 beers on tap. Question, how many, raise your hand, let me know, and there's a prize for whoever has the right answer. How many beers has Mike and Bobby brewed that we have put out online? How many would you say? Altogether, since we've opened?
56.
48.
All of them.
48.
Nope, 56 is close.
58.
Nope.
64.
Who said 64? 64? You're right. They have put out 64 beers. And yeah. So, Jose, you that Justin? This is for you. This was done by Lake Ontario Press for us a while ago. So, enjoy. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, as I mentioned, we have food. We have probably the smallest kitchen this side of Irondequoit, but we put out some really banging food. Andy, our kitchen manager, has worked really hard to put together a menu for you. And the one thing that I really wanted to make sure that was happening was that we worked with other local establishments. We work with Ridge Donuts, where we bring in their donuts every Sunday for our brunch, and we do a beer and donut pairing every Sunday. We get our bread for our rolls and our salty bread pizza from Amazing Grains Bakery, which is in Fairport, which highly recommend if you ever go to Fairport to give them a try. We get our kombucha locally. We get our soda from College Club, who's been in business in Rochester on Grape Street for over 100 years. Who else? Swans. We get our sausage from them, our meats from them. Great, great family. So, it's just really important that not only when you come and you visit, that you have a really good beer, but you have a really good burger, or a really good pizza or wing. So we're really proud of that. The one thing that COVID did was it forced us to take a look at our outdoor space. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits that I think, walking away from COVID, that we took our outdoor space and we turned it into, I think, a beautiful space. We have, I would say, over 100 seats out there. In the wintertime, we have heaters, we have fire pits. So even when it's cold out, or you're not maybe comfortable to sit outside, you can sit, or sit inside, you can sit outside by the fire. We have awnings that we put out. So when it rains in Rochester, which is probably 300 days out of the year, you can still sit outside and not get wet. So that space is really, it's so much fun in the summer. We'll have bands out there, and it's just a great vibe out there. So that's what is going on there today. I wanted to just show you the pictures that Mike reviewed with you, and now what that same exact space looks like. So this is literally the same spot. So you can see up there where the staircase is, the rickety old staircase, and then we have this beautiful staircase that Mike and the crew built and designed and built. You know, the walls, as Mike said, were all white, painted white, and now they're just gorgeous, gorgeous walls. And the floor was a dirt floor, and now it's beautiful wood floor. Over here on the top, that hole where that window is on the right is now the opening that goes into the tasting room. So you can just see through these pictures that it was just a labor of love, really. Taking this, what was once a beautiful barn, and just dusting it off and making it shine again, and bringing people into it, bringing life into it, and fun and laughter, and it's just a good spot. And the doors, as Mike said, these are still, every once in a while you'll catch someone, you know, playing with it and closing it, but it's just really cool. When people come around the corner, when they come in and they've never been, and they come into the barn and they come into the stable, they're like, either they're like horrified, they're like, I'm gonna eat where a horse was, or they're like, wow, this is really cool. This is really cool. The Betsy stall. And then we have over here, we have an area where there's pictures of the Vercruysse family. It shows, you know, where, you know, who had this space and who made it, and kind of honor them. And this is the upstairs. The upstairs is probably actually my favorite place in the building. You just walk up there and you feel like you're home. It's just nice, comfy couches and chairs and rugs and that beautiful chandelier. It's just really cozy. It's just a different feel, you know, other than just sitting at a regular tavern table or the bar. It's just, it's very homey. We did a couple of these Prohibition murals, again, to kind of give it that old feel. And we also reserve this space for private events. So if you're looking for, you know, you just want to have a little party, 25 people, we reserve the space at no charge. And you can relax instead of getting your home all dirty and all that. You come here and relax, and we take care of you. And these are probably the most comfortable chairs at a bar. There's a lot of people that come in, and we might have a waiting list for a table. So they'll start at the bar, and they'll come and they'll sit down, and they'll be like, I'm not moving, I'm staying here. And they do, they end up staying there for an hour or so and enjoy, so. And then this is the outdoor space I was telling you about. This was a night that we had a band, different every time, playing. Mike Vidala from Irondequoit, his band. It was a fun night. But we just have, you know, families come. We have, it's pet friendly, dog friendly. So there's sometimes you go out there and there'll be, you know, 8 dogs out there. And for the most part, they're really well behaved. I'm very surprised. So yeah, so.
Better than high schoolers.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
So that's pretty much what the space looks like now. If you ever want to stay connected to what's going on, we have Facebook, Instagram. We have an email blast that goes out. If you're interested in getting those emails, you can email me at my email, and you can receive those like on a monthly basis. It just talks about new beers that are coming out, new food specials, any events. We have beer and food pairing events on a monthly basis. So it just kind of keeps you connected. And our website, if you wanted to order food online, this is where you can go and click on to order food online, or if you go to Google and you look us up, you can order food online there too. So these are just ways to connect and stay connected with us and to know what's going on. And that's all I have. I'm gonna shoot it over to Nate to talk about beer. And thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Just before we start, I hope everybody can hear me. If you can't, let me know. I am used to speaking over 25 teenagers for 7 hours a day, so I can project if need be if you can't hear me. I gotta say, this is very nice. I wish I had this kind of attention at school, but that's neither here nor there. So thank you all for having us tonight and for listening. And I hope that I won't bore you. I'm gonna do a little bit of overview on beer. I know like two things in the world, literature and beer. And so I'm gonna talk about beer here because they told me not to talk about literature. So we're gonna start off with beer basics. I wanna talk a little bit about what beer is, how you make it. And by the way, before I start, if anybody here is at all interested in home brewing, please do it. It is so easy to make good beer. It's more difficult to make great beer, but I gotta tell you, it's the best hobby that I have ever had, and I've had a ton of them. It's the only one that ends up with beer, which is great. So I encourage anybody to, if you're at all interested in home brewing, do it. Go out and get yourself a couple of plastic buckets, start small, couple of buckets and a kit, and I think you'll be happy. But anyway, let's talk beer basics. First of all, here is some of us. So you'll know this is about 4 years ago, 4 years and 30 pounds ago. It turns out that professionally drinking beer is not super great for your health. But so these are some of our pictures of our brew house after it was just installed right away. You can see the grain mill on the bottom left. And then after you brew the beer, you have to grain out, which is the least fun part of anything, but you have to do it. Up there, you'll see that's Bobby, our other brewer, and my best friend aside from my wife. And that's our kind of our laboratory there in the back. And if you ever come over and Bobby or I are around and you want to come back and take a look, we'll be happy to show you around and give you a little tour. Doesn't take long. You do have to put up with us, but again, it doesn't take too long. So the first question, what goes into beer? There are 4 ingredients that are going to be in just about every beer made. And despite what some of those macro guys will tell you, rice is not one of them. Water, obviously. So I should let you know, most of beer, the majority of beer is made up of water. So if you want to think of it like that, it's a pretty healthy drink. So you got water, you got malts, which are grains, barley and various types of barley, wheat. There are lots of different kinds that are kilned at a different temperature to give them dark, light, different flavors. Malts, hops, or some kind of bittering agent. I'm not going to go all the way back and talk about ancient beer history, but going all the way back to like Egypt and Mesopotamia, they were brewing beer, but they didn't use hops because they weren't native to those areas. So they used other things to bitter it. Because if you don't use a bittering agent, it's just going to be like this sweet sugar bomb, and we don't want that. So water, malts, hops, and then yeast. Yeast is what eats up the sugars, and for lack of a better phrase, that eats the sugars and poops out the alcohol. Again, I'm an English teacher, not a scientist or a science teacher, so that's my understanding at least. So those are the 4 ingredients. It is. So enjoy that when you're drinking your next beer. The brewing process, like I said, it's not a super complex one at its most basic level. That's why homebrewing is easy to make good beer. So the first is the mash in. That's where you take the grains and you mill them. So you'll see this handsome devil dumping a whole bunch of grains into our mill. So this is a mill and has 2 rotors, and they rotate against each other and crush up the grain. You don't want to like powder the grain. You just want to basically take each kernel and crack it open so that the water can get to the sugars that are inside. And this is the grain mill itself right here. With the grain, it goes down in the center there. And a typical beer will be, for us, we brew 5 barrels, 6, we push 6.5 through. It'll be about between 450 and 600 pounds of grain. And it's a lot of grain, yeah. And so we have to, each bag is like 50 pounds. So Bobby and I have to lift that up to the grain mill and dump it in, and it mills it up. And then it goes into our mash tun. Adding salts. So depending on the beer, you might want to play with the water chemistry a little bit. I said earlier, I'm not a scientist, but I know enough to know, because computers help me, how many salts to add. Like we add calcium chloride, we'll add, believe it or not, we add chalk. And then sometimes we add table salts and some other things, and it just messes with the water chemistry enough to give the beer a different flavor profile or mouthfeel. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with water. So you add those, and then you mash it in, and that basically means you dump the grain into this giant steel tank with a bunch of water, and you let it steep. And what it does, like with the tea bag. And so essentially what it does is it pulls the sugars off. And you want those sugars, because otherwise the yeast has nothing to poop out for alcohol. So you want those. And so that's what this is. It's hard to see here, but the grain's there and the water's there, and just let it sit for about an hour to pull those sugars off. Then you move to the second step, you move the wort. So there are a lot of really fun German words in brewing, because the Germans were, an early adopter, and I have German roots, so that's fun. Wort, W-O-R-T, is essentially unfermented beer. So that's what it is until the yeast hits it. So you got to move the wort around. And I told you, fun German words like Vorlauf and Lauter. It's so much fun. So Vorlaufing is when you take the beer, or the wort that is in the mash tun, and you kind of cycle it through. We have 3 pumps on the brew house, and one of those will pump it through and kind of cycle it back through on top of each other. What that does is it pulls the water off of the grains, so you kind of compress the grain bed and you clear out the wort, so you don't have big chunks of stuff in it. And then that's Vorlaufing. And then to lauter is moving it from one giant stainless steel tank through some pipes into another giant stainless steel tank, which is where you can see that, by the way, these are both Vorlaufing, lautering, goes through the same pipe for a while and then shoots off different direction. And then once you lauter and it goes into the boil kettle, this is where you boil. So you heat the wort up, and you got to boil it. 211, 212, you want to get that. That'll kill any bugs, any bacteria that might have been on the grains, or just to make sure it's all very sterile. Cleaning is the name of the game with brewing. That was always a challenge in home brewing. I think the second biggest challenge was making sure that everything was spotless and clean, because you don't want an infected beer unless you're making a sour, which we'll talk about later. So you're going to heat the wort up, you're going to boil it, and that's when you add your hops. And you can see our lovely hops that we add here, which so many people like. If you like IPAs, this is what gives your IPA the flavor and aroma. We use pellets, which are basically big hop cones crushed down into tiny little, like rabbit food sized pellets. And you can add those, you can add, we've used honey in the boil, I'm trying to think what else. We just used something weird. We've done all kinds of stuff in the boil. You can throw in whatever you want. Oh, that was it, Butterfingers. We threw Butterfingers in the boil. I will admit, didn't work out as well as we'd hoped. We ended up rebrewing that beer. We just put the Butterfingers in later. So you boil that, and that sanitizes it, and there's a lot of chemical reactions that I won't bore you with. You can see it boils here. It has all kinds of cool foam, and if you're not careful, it will boil over. And what that looks like is a bunch of 212-degree sugar water pouring out the top of your stainless steel tank, which is not ideal, because that stuff is very sticky. We've only had that happen a couple of times, so that's fine. I mean, never, Mike, don't worry. So step 3 is the boil. So once you boiled it, you're good to go. Usually you boil about an hour. For some beers, 90 minutes. We've boiled up to 120 minutes for our big, giant stouts, because what that does is, if you think about it, you have this much sugar, right, in this much liquid, and if you boil some of that liquid off, you still have the same amount of sugar, but there's going to be more per gallon, which means you'll have higher ABV. So for those big stouts, is what we want. Then you've got Step 4, wort to beer. So you knock it out, you move it from the boil kettle into our big fermenters, and that's where it sits for a while. So you knock it out, which means you send it over. You can see here, it's going from the boil kettle through a big hose on the ground that goes into a fermenter, and then it ferments. You put the yeast in, and it does its thing. And it usually takes, depending on the yeast, it can take anywhere from 4 to 12, 13, 14 days. Bigger beers, you're gonna let sit and kind of, like in cooking, right? When you make chili, you want that chili to sit for hours and hours and hours so that those flavors will come out and kind of meld together. Same with those big complex beers. You want those flavors to round themselves out. You might leave it for a little while longer. Conditioning, that's what we're talking about. You can add more adjuncts there when we do our fruited sours. That's when we fruit our those beers. We wait till fermentation is done. We drop all the yeast out, and then you add your fruits. We add vanilla beans. We can add cocoa nibs for chocolate beers, hazelnuts, almonds, those kind of things we can add after fermentation and just kind of let it condition on those. Then you package it. You see all of our kegs here. Not mentioned here is sampling. You have to sample the beers. You have to, because how will you know it's good? So here you can see Bobby. He's in Tahoe right now, or he'd be here too. You can see Bobby pouring our fruit puree into the fermenters for one of our sours. We only use puree. We don't use extracts for fruits because the real thing just tastes better. So, and we want it to be good. And then you end up with everybody's favorite part, the actual beer. And you can see that there are 3 different beers here, and they are very different colors. I'm going to talk a little bit about various styles, a very little amount, because I don't want to bore you. What I think is interesting very often is not to other people. It's something I've learned with 16 years of teaching. So you package it and then you enjoy it. We'll talk about that later. So part 2, craft beer in America. So this is a little bit of history. Again, I'm not going to go too far back. I'm going to start at essentially the birth of American craft beer, which was post-World War II. So much of our society changed at World War II, and the ripple effects of that, obviously, we're still feeling. And one of those is craft beer. So the troops came home, and they had been all over Europe, and when they had downtime, they were drinking a lot of beer, because why wouldn't you? And they got a taste for all these different styles in Europe, from brown ales to lots of, so many German style lagers, which is one of my favorite types of beer. And they came home and they were drinking the same, like the post-prohibition beers that were very one note. They were very homogenized here in America because that was cheap and because that was just what beer was post-prohibition. And so they came home and they started going, I don't want this. I want what I had in Dusseldorf. I want what I had in Dortmunder. And so that gave birth essentially to the rise of homebrewing. There was just one problem. Homebrewing was illegal for years, and within the past 20 years, homebrewing has been illegal in some places, to a certain extent. Home distilling is still illegal, which is bizarre to me, but what do I know? So 1945, we can kind of go there. That's where homebrewing and craft beer started in America. So just a few other landmark dates for craft beer. 1965, if any of you have ever had an Anchor Brewing Company, like Anchor Steam Beer is one of the original craft beers. They opened their doors in January of 1965, and it changed the landscape of American beer. Then 13 years later, homebrewing is legalized federally by Jimmy Carter, who just passed, sadly, but thank you, Mr. Carter, for not making me a criminal. And then a year later, the first homebrewers conference in Denver, Colorado. I just got back from Denver, Colorado in September. I went out there with Bobby for the Great American Beer Fest as purely as fans. We did not bring any beer out there. We just drank a lot. So that first one, the first Homebrewers Conference was in Denver, Colorado. And then 1981, a couple years later, the first New York State craft brewery opened by William S. Newman Brewing Company. They are no longer in existence, but hey, they were the first. Thank them very much. And then just a few months later, Sierra Nevada, which I said Anchor Steam changed things, but Sierra Nevada, that was like it. That was it. That was one of the first major national, this is way different than anything you've ever had brewing companies. If you've ever had Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, it's just a perfect beer. In fact, for my wedding, I homebrewed a clone of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and it was our favors. So everybody who came got a bottle of Matrimony Ale. And my cousin is an artist and a graphic designer, and he did a label of my wife and I on the bottle. My dad still has one at his house. I've been married, it'll be 14 years in April, and my dad still has a bottle unopened in his refrigerator at home. I'm like, Dad, please don't ever open that. That's not going to be great. It's going to be vinegar, but he's still got one. It's a beautiful label, and so yeah, Sierra Nevada changed the game. And then the first Great American Beer Fest was June of 1982. And that, again, I think there were 20 breweries or 20 home brewers there. And now we just went out this past year and there were hundreds of breweries and thousands of beers. It was great. I didn't have them all, but not for lack of trying. January 1984, Boston Beer Company. I mentioned this because that's Sam Adams. That was another game changer. Their Boston Lager is still a great macro beer, and their Oktoberfest is still a solid Oktoberfest. They changed the landscape just like Sierra Nevada did. And then 2013, Mississippi and Alabama legalized homebrewing. 2013, that was 10 years ago. So President Carter made it legal in 1978 federally, but we all know that just because something is legal federally doesn't mean it's legal in every state. And Mississippi and Alabama waited until July of 2013 to say, sure, you can make 5 gallons of beer at home. I'm not going to say any more about that, but we finally got full legalization in 2013 of homebrewing. All right, so just a couple more things. Some of the key figures, key names in craft beer, many of which you'll recognize. D.G. Yuengling and Son, the first American craft brewery, Yuengling. When I was in college and was starting to drink, for the record, I was 20 and a half when I had my first beer, which many of my friends and my wife were not 20 and a half when they had their first beer. But she's from Newfane.
I was 14.
14? Wow.
Yeah, all right.
Anyway, when I was first drinking beer and kind of getting into beer, Yuengling was starting to distribute up here. I was in college. It was the early 2000s. And I remember you could get a 12-pack of Yuengling Black and Tan for $7.99. It was great. It was great. And so I will always have a love for Yuengling's beer. I don't drink it much anymore, but I did for a while there. It was a very good, I went straight to that as opposed to like most of the macros, for whatever that's worth. Michael Jackson, my favorite Michael Jackson, has nothing to do with Thriller. He was this famous landmark beer writer. He wrote the World Guide to Beers. He was kind of the godfather of craft beer exposure and like getting it out to the world. I have a couple of his books at home, and he's just this fascinating guy. If you want to read up on beer, he's a great place to start. Charlie Papazian, who is the godfather of American homebrewing, much love for this guy. He was the first president of the American Homebrewers Association, and he was driving force behind the Great American Beer Festival. And I first went to the Great American Beer Fest 2018, and I went by myself, and it was his last official Great American Beer Fest. He was like, I'm getting older. I can't spend 3 days drinking nonstop. And one of my biggest regrets in life, he walked past me, and I did one of those, when you walk past someone, they go, oh crap. And I turned around to try and find him and like thank him, because I read his books. He wrote all kinds of home brewing, books, and I read them all. I have them all still. And I turned around, I wanted to get a picture with him because we were starting the brewery. And I was like, we could put a picture of me and Charlie Papazian in the freaking brewery. And I couldn't find him. And to this day, I just am so sad about that. It would have been a great moment to thank him for, and be like, I started home brewing because of you, and, I'm opening up a brewery, and thank you, but wasn't to be. Larry Bell, if any of you ever drink Bell's beer, they make a perfect beer. They make a lot of great beer, but they make Two Hearted Ale, which to my mind is an absolute perfect beer. There's nothing wrong with it. It is just perfect. And Larry Bell started Bell's Brewery out of Michigan, and he's another big name for anybody who drinks craft beer. You got to thank Larry Bell. Jim Coach, that's from Sam Adams, huge. And Paul Leone, I love Paul Leone. He is the head of the New York State Brewers Association, a great guy. He's actually come to a couple of our events over there. Super great guy, really kind and nice, and has really fought so hard for craft breweries in New York State. So anytime you go to a craft brewery, I can guarantee, here in New York, I can guarantee you that Paul's been there. He's talked with the brewers, and he's fought for their right to exist, essentially. So kudos to Paul. Craft beer in the modern world. Did I not capitalize this? I didn't write that, did I? You wrote that, you didn't capitalize anything. No. We'll talk later. All right. So don't tell my students. They wouldn't notice. Okay. There are more than 9,500 craft breweries in the U.S. as of 2022. Those are the last stats we have, obviously. That's a lot of craft breweries. We are in the midst of a boom here in the country, and we are incredibly spoiled here in Western New York. There are 504 craft breweries in New York State, 25 craft breweries just in Monroe County last year. We had a couple of closures and a whole bunch of openings. 25 just in the county, which is just wonderful. We are so spoiled in Western and even Central New York. Syracuse has a bunch, which is where I grew up. But the quality of beer being put out in Rochester, New York is unbelievable at this point. I know we get compared to like Buffalo and Syracuse. We are worlds ahead of Syracuse. As a Syracusean? Well, Baldwinsvillian, but most people know Syracuse. I can safely say that the Rochester scene is just head and shoulders above the Syracuse one, which is very good. But we got great beer here in Rochester. A lot of people will put Buffalo ahead of us. I wouldn't. Not that it's a competition. There are some incredible breweries in Buffalo and some great people. But Rochester, man, we've got some great beer. And you can see that in local festivals. I don't know if any of you have been to the Real Beer Expo that used to be down on Gregory Street or Flower City. These and a whole bunch of other ones. A local place had a Stout Fest about a month ago that was just killer. You probably haven't heard of it. It's a very small place. No, that's our plug. IBC had a Stout Fest where we had 30 area breweries send stouts over, and it was awesome. It was our inaugural one. We didn't know how it would go, but it went really well. Other breweries were great, but we are very spoiled in this area. You go another place, you go down to Pennsylvania, and they have more breweries than we do, but we've got better ones. Don't tell anybody in Pennsylvania I said that. But the point is that if you are looking to get into craft beer or you are interested in craft beer, now is the time to go out and explore. We have so many wonderful breweries within a 20-minute drive. It's stunning. I've been drinking beer for 20 years now, a little under, and there's never been a better time to be a craft beer fan. And a great place to start would be at the only brewery in Irondequoit. There is one here, and it is just right down the road. It's obviously I'm biased, but I think we're putting out some very good beer right now. We're having a hell of a lot of fun with it, and I hope to see you guys over there sometime. I really would enjoy that. So here's some beer. Yeah, so you can see, oh God, why did you put a big shot of my face? You can see we've got, one of the nice things about beer is there's so many different flavors and colors and types. We've got, this is a fruited Kolsch we did. That looks like, Red Girl? No, it's not Red Girl. What is that? Is that, oh, Oktoberfest?
No, that's the,
Is that our Irish Red?
no,
On tap right now, by the way.
keep going.
Let's keep going.
That's a,
Across the pond?
No,
That's our extra special bitter.
Flowers we had.
no, it's not a sour.
No, it's something. I remember this photo shoot. No,
in our class.
yeah, right. My wife's a photographer. She took a lot of these pictures. I know she took that one, and I can't remember what it was. If Bobby were here, he would know. He's younger than I am. His memory's better. I'm guessing that's one of our sours.
That's not a sour.
That is Liberator, our Doppelbock, which is my favorite beer that we brew. Liberator, yes. Liberator is a Doppelbock, like I said, which literally means double box. If you've ever had Genesee's Springbock, which is my favorite beer they brew, it's like that on steroids. It's a double bock. It's my favorite beer that we brew. We have it in the tanks right now. We're gonna leave it there as long as we possibly can before we need it. Because the longer you lager a lager, yeah, that's right. The longer you let a lager condition, the better it's going to be. So that's Doppelbock. This is our trail mix stout, which has peanuts and raisins and chocolate and something else in it that was silly. Can't remember, but there's a ton of stuff in that one. And this was our Ukraine beer. So this is a nice little story, and I'll end on this because I think I'm ending on that. Yep, I am. Oh, I'm hitting stuff. Okay, so I'll end on this story. So there was a brewery in Ukraine that when the war over there and the invasion by Russia had started, they decided we are not going to brew beer right now because we have more important things to do. So they started using their bottles for Molotov cocktails, which is amazing. And they put all kinds of pictures on, on the internet with their labels, but stuffed with, anyway, Molotov cocktails. And what they did for the brewing community is they said, here are our recipes for 5 of our beers. We can't brew them right now, but we don't think that means that nobody should. Take our recipes for free, brew our beer, and pledge a chunk of your sales of that beer to Ukraine relief. We did that. It was a wonderful experience. I don't remember how much exactly we ended up donating, but we donated a bunch of money to to a couple of local charities that went to Ukraine, and it was just a really neat experience and an example of what craft beer, but the community can do and what humans can do for each other. That is one thing that I have been very impressed with being a part of the Rochester craft brewing community. Leslie's talked about how IBC is a family, and it very much is. So is the craft beer brewing community in Rochester. We all have an email thread, and we'll send out like, oh crap, we're short this yeast, or we need another 50 pounds of this malt. Does anybody have one? And somebody will chime in and say, yeah, we'll bring it over. 3 times we've been short on yeast, or like had yeast that went, it was too old, and I've sent out emails or texted other brewers, and they've, like 3 Heads a couple of times has brought yeast over to us. And it's just remarkable. There's no other industry where the competition goes, oh, you guys need something to make something that's going to compete against ours? Here, take it. And we do collaborations. We've done collaborations with 4 breweries in Rochester. We're doing a 5th one this coming Monday. It's remarkable. Beer is more than just a beverage. It really is a community. And I think that has been the most rewarding part of all of this. So thank you all for listening to me. And thank you to Mike and Leslie and Wendy. Nice to see you, Wendy. So thank you all. Mike, do you want to? Oh, I'll hit the next
Open
one.
up to questions. If anybody has anything want to ask Nate, Leslie, or myself.
And if you'd like a free 10-ounce pour, point your smartphone camera at that thing, and it'll somehow give you one.
I just want to thank you so much for the informative program. I mean, it was just really exciting. We've been there, we've taken our children who are out of town, and they love it. So every time,
Thank you.
They come into town, we go over there, they enjoy it. I just want to say, if there are questions for the team here, go ahead and, go up and ask them. But we do have some, sorry.